Yanandana Salakaya Chaturvidhamyena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Ajanulambita Pujo Kanagavanato Sankirtanai Kapitaro Kamalaya Tasho Vishwambaro Dvijavaro Yudhadharma Haro Vande Jagat Priyakaro Karunavotaro Vande Shri Krishna Chaitanya Nityananda Sahodito Vajrayana Vishwabandhu Chitrasango Namodo Vande Shri Ramakrishna Abhaya Charanasako Sundaro Paramanando Sundaro Sundayo Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagapate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Namaste Bhaktivam Chananorangi Radhe Radhaneshwari Vishnu Sute Radharani Hari Shri Guru Vaishnava Guru Parampara Ki Jai Shri Chaitanya Charitamrita Ki Jai Gaur Premanande. Evening, everyone. We have such a nice community here. So many kirtaniers we have. Krishna Chaitanya, kirtanier, he gives nice classes. Ramana Gopal, kirtanier, he gives nice classes. Not far from here is going on, also kirtanier, and his family, regularly attending. Welcome, Maharaj. Maharaj, of course, is here quite a bit of time, kirtanier, and learning. Spending this Gauri Siddhanta, Lal Chandra also, giving his Lord lectures. Nice community. Just separate a little bit by time. And then more to them around us here. And many other devotees. So we're hearing from Caitanya Charitamrita. Coming to the conclusion of this section where Krishna's coverage is actually in an extended, considerably extended sense, he is explaining the Panchatattva. This is the last verse of his Mangalacharan. All of the verses, the 14 of them, he has a lengthy explanation. This is the last of them. And this is his explanation. In the middle of his explanation, he mentions the Panchatattva's bookends of this chapter, so to speak, at the onset and at the end, speaking at the onset, how they engaged themselves in indiscriminate, empowered distribution of love of God. The three Prabhus, Team Prabhu, Gaurhari, Nityananda Prabhu, and Advaita, and then the devotees, headed by Srivas and the Shakti, meaning the Swarup Shakti, Gadadhar Pandit, this is the Panchatattva. And so together, empowered, in an empowered way, they propagate the Sankirtan and leave no stone uncovered, no heart that has been touched is the idea. They set in motion the tidal wave of the distribution of love of God. And so that the nature of that, what that love of God, how that love of God is distributed through Sankirtan is then explained in the narrative here of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's meeting with the sannyasis. He educates them about Nam Dharma when they, learned sannyasis as they were, questioned his singing and dancing in the public. So I explained to them, this is the Dharma of Kali Yuga. My Guru told me to do this. I'm a fool, but I just follow him, and so on. Throughout, we find this contrast that Mahaprabhu is making between the proud Mayavadins and humble devotees. Of course, you can meet many, many humble Mayavadis who are more humble than many devotees. Devotees who aren't dressed in the decorum mandated by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Trinadapi, Sunichena, Tarodapi, Sishnamanina, Mandarina, Caitanya. These are the new regulative principles. Four more, let us say. So to decorate oneself with humility. That said, as I say, you can meet many Mayavadis who are very humble, but in a more metaphysical sense, devotees want to underscore their lack of humility by way of explaining that Mahaprabhu has that the jiva is tiny and insignificant and a spark of the fire that is Brahman, and to think that the jiva is Brahman, who is actually in the full sense Bhagwan, complete with six opulences and endowed with many shaktis and so on and so forth, is the height of absurdity. To think that the jiva is one with Brahman, and this is of course the whole focus of the Mayavad. This is their knowledge, so-called oneness between Brahman and Atman. This is the end of knowledge, beginning and end, so to speak. Beginning, middle, and the end. So in that sense, he doesn't say it, but he wants to say it, that they're proud, and he keeps himself in a very humble position. They are sannyasis, they refer to one another as Narayan, Om Narayan, you're Narayan, I'm Narayan, you become God. And we are examples of Brahman being one with, Atman being one with Brahman, or in pursuit of that, and so forth. So Mahaprabhu, characteristically of devotee of Vaishnavas, he kept himself very humble throughout this whole discourse from beginning to end, making this contrast. And of course, he explained also the theory. What is Jiva Shakti? We've heard this. After explaining why he did what he did, performed Nam Sankirtan and so forth, and then they said, well, okay, there's nothing wrong with being a devotee of Krishna, we don't object to that, but why not study Vedanta? What's wrong with that? And then he began to speak about the way in which they studied Vedanta, what was the problem with it. So again, in the course of that, the overarching point that he makes is that Shankaracharya's way of understanding the Vedanta is mental speculation. This is where Prabhupada really gets this idea from, because when you take the, as I said the other night, you take the other schools of Vedanta, Vishishta Dvaita, Dvaitavad, Dvaita, Dvaita, Shuddha Dvaita, the Vaishnava Sampradayas. We don't, we were speaking today, Krishna Chaitanya and I, and Managopal, about Krishna Chaitanya's experience with a Tirupati temple. There are a number of temples in North America now that have been established by the wealthiest deity in the world, Venkateshwar in Tirupati, a place that Prabhupada wanted to go. Did he go there? I remember when he was passing out from the world just a month or so beforehand. I think he didn't go. He wanted to go, and he said to who was then Panchadvita Maharaj that you went there, you know, through you I went there, or something like that. He had this desire to have the darshan of Venkateshwar. And so he's wealthy, and he's got now palaces around the world, at least throughout North America, maybe in Europe as well. One of them is just a few miles from there. There may be one just in Charlotte as well. I'm not sure. I heard there were several Hindu temples there. But at any rate, we're talking a little bit about their temple and their conception and so forth. And Krishna Chaitanya was learning from them hearing from them how they preceded their practices rather than with the worship of Ganesh, with the worship of Vishvaksena. And that's a little different. And even the worship of Ganesh is mentioned in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. Without any much explanation, Prabhupada introduced it in some ways, and then he kind of drew back from that. And one of my godbrothers really wanted to get into it, pick out some abstract thing and then make it the focus of their whole practice, worship of Ganesh. And there's a nice verse in Brahma Samhita, of course, speaking of Ganesh, and as Brahma Samhita does, speaking of all the gods and goddesses, so all in relation to Govinda. So in context. Anyway, he wanted to worship Ganesh, and the temple authorities were complaining about it. I think he wrote to Prabhupada. And he cited an example that Guru Kripa Swami also worships Ganesh, because he would chant this verse from Brahma Samhita, do a simple worship. And Prabhupada wrote back or something like, if you can give me $100,000 a month to build a temple in Mount Guru, you can worship Ganesh like Guru Kripa also. He's getting the results. He was raising a lot of money at the time, helping Prabhupada to build a temple in Mayapur and Vrindavan, the Krishna Balaram temple. So at any rate, they worship Vishvaksena in the way that many worship Ganesh. Ganesh means the Lord of the common people. So he's said to be the one who removes obstacles in the way of material progress. Of course, we understand him as well from the Brahma Samhita to be a devotee of Nrsimhadev. He's attached to Nrsimhadev. He worships Nrsimhadev. So we worship Ganesh in the context of his being a devotee of Bhagavan Narasimha. And we are only interested really in removing the obstacles for bhakti, material obstacles. Or there, I guess we want to remove those too. The bhakti has the power to do that. You don't need independent, separate means for that. So at any rate, they worship Vishvaksena and say, so they were explaining that to him, and then I guess you discussed it with them, Krishna Chaitanya discussed it, and they said, we do it a little differently than you. We see things a little differently than you. But it was not a problem. Krishna's too, Bhagavan Swayam, we see the Venkateshwar as an avatar of Krishna. They see Krishna as an avatar of Venkateshwar. Their Krishnastami or Janmastami is a holiday, but it's not the big thing for them. They have some other letters there, anything?
I can never understand what they're saying. There's like 7 days. It's the way that Lord Brahma worships Vishnu, and they're following the footsteps of the Brahmins. Something. There's 7 days in May that they.
7 days in May. There you go.
Well, it's got a name.
Yeah. See, we're not even familiar with. So this is Ramanuja Sampradaya.
I think so.
Yeah. And so they have their perspective in Vaikuntha, and it's very fascinating. You ever seen any of the posters of the drawings of the whole world and how the jiva gets there and so forth? It's just fascinating. Vaikuntha is absolutely fascinating. I had an experience to go there once in in Padmanabh Kshetra. What's the secular name for that? Padmanabh Kshetra, city in South India. No.
Kerala?
In Kerala.
Sure.
It's in Kerala. It's the city.
Cochin?
No. Anyway, Padmanabh Kshetra is the real name of the place. And a huge temple of Padmanabh Vishnu, like 24 feet long. There's several of them, I think. And I got to go there on Ekadasi. It was an incredible experience. And they had a whole parade going on inside the temple compound, which is a whole city unto itself. Elephants, horses, carrying the small Vijay deity, and every so often they would stop and there would be trumpets, conch shells, and boom, boom, kettle drums, and Brahmins chanting, and they go to the next altar, and it was just out of this world. Really so. So it's a fascinating place, and they don't know much about Golok. Vaikuntha. It's a different perspective. So the point here only is that there are different Vaishnav perspectives. We worship them all, and in Mayapur, at the Samadhi of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, then he has the deities of each of the Charyas, for the Vishnu Swami, Ramanuja, Madhva, and Nimbarka there. So there's none of Shankaracharya, is the point. So so when we say, and I mentioned this the other night, worth repeating, when we say as it is, and this is where Prabhupada gets his term, as it is, throughout his Gita, he is going out of his way to expose in a very very directly, the Mayavad philosophy in a kind of a blunt way, not real sophisticated, but in a real blunt way with real kind of blunt examples, some of which we see here. What is this? Preposterous for the jiva to think that he's Brahman, suffering from, or that the Brahman is Krishna. Ishwar is a manifestation of the material modes of nature. So anyway, so as you know, Prabhupada built that into his Pranam, Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatadesa Tarane. I heard someone say the other day that Krishna West, Prabhupada used the same thing. Paschatya means west. He wanted the cultural conquest of the West. He wanted cows to be worshipped. Isn't it the Vaikuntha temple before everything you have to have a cow? That's on the Krishna Janmashtami. Without the cow, Krishna's not present. Such a nice, rich culture. At any rate, as it is means taking the scripture and not distorting it by way of taking the direct statements that don't require some extra explanation and giving them an indirect explanation. I've given the classic example. Why don't you come to my house? It's just down not far from here on the Ganges. And I say that to you, you think, okay, he lives on the Ganges. But you know, I don't really live in the water. I live on the bank of the Ganges. That's a way of speaking. So he lives on the Ganges, not far. So it requires some interpretation. This is an example of Gaunavritti, a text that needs to be interpreted, and you can't take it as it is. And then there are the statements that are Mukhavritti, direct statements. So many statements, for example, about the personality of God, of eternality, His form, the qualities, pastimes, and so forth. And so to switch those around and interpret those indirectly to screw out some other meaning, this is what Shankar has done. This means then to speculate and not accept it as it is. And now it's important to note that in accepting it as it is, there are still multiple interpretations, because you have the Vaikuntha, you have the Ramanuja's perspective, the Madhva's perspective, Nimbarka's perspective, Vishnu Swami's perspective. They're all different. If you go and listen to the Ramanuja Sampradaya, you think they got it all wrong. They've even got words we don't even use. They use different words, and they explain. Everything's different. Everything's different. And some of the rag-oriented Sampradaya, like Bala, was still very just like you'd be lost. Which shows some of the relativity of the explanation, which Bhaktivinoda Thakur underscores. Philosophy is also relative. There's only it's an attempt with language and reason to explain that which transcends it, and so forth. That said, still the explanations are different, and the goal is slightly different also, or quite different in some instances. The difference between intimate love of God, for example, and reverential love of God is a big difference than within Vallabha and Nimbarka, who are interested in Vrindavan and Krishna Lila. There are also differences. So that's the need for different sampradayas. So we should understand the relativity of the Siddhanta in one sense and be very acquainted with it, because it is what we hold on to and by which we get a handle on where we're going and how to go there and so on and so forth. So, point is that amongst the four schools of Vedanta, there are differences, and they are all accepting it as it is, more or less. Much more, let's say, than the Shankars. It was much less, doing away with the eternality of the person of Vaikuntha, doing away with Vaikuntha. I mean, he's done away with everything. He's done away with the material world. He's done away with the spiritual world. He's done away with the jiva. What's left? And that's what you have to wonder. 18, it's not this, it's not that. But can't say anything about it. And therefore, we say, you be quiet. We talk. You sit. You follow your philosophy. You say nothing, and we will do the talking. So. So it's a monologue. It's a doctrine of illusion. Everything's an illusion. The world, the spiritual world, there's the material world, the Ishwar, Bhakti, the Jiva. There's only something called Brahman that you can't say anything about. Something like that. So this is the classic example of speculating on the nature of the scripture. We find several places where Shankar has added something in, like his 2 tiers of Brahman. I've commented in the 12th chapter of the Gita, my edition, on this, and shown exactly where Shankar in the Vedanta Sutra develops this idea of 2 tiers and how it's not in the text at all. And that's why strong words are used in this chapter. And Mahaprabhu says through the pen of Krishnadas Kaviraj in one place, characterizing Shankar's perspective, Vyas Branta. Shankar has said Vyas is crazy. He doesn't know what he's talking about. So leave it to me to explain. So practically, he's come up with his own sutras. The interpretation is such. That is the Gaudiya perspective, and it's the Vaishnava perspective throughout the different sampradayas, and for good reason. So the point I'm making here, one of the points I'm trying to make here is that when we say as it is, this is not a mandate for literalism, and every word has to be taken literally, and you get into this fundamentalist perspective, and a whole other side of problems. It's so much worse than the Mayavad because it becomes offensive too, and often, and it should be avoided. So this is the overarching emphasis, and then Mahaprabhu has given some examples thus far. The example of what? Of Brahman and Atma, Jiva and Atma one. The Brahman has no Shaktis, and by contrast, Vaishnava perspective, he has endowed with many Shaktis. He's quoted the Gita in this regard, Vishnu Purana in this regard, citing the three main Shaktis, internal, external, marginal, and so forth. He's pointed out that the Mahavakya, the main sounds, we discussed this last night, but the Vedanta is not Tattvamasi, it's Omkar. And that should be apparent. I mean, everybody's heard of Om, sort of Hinduism. Everybody's been in any yoga studio knows how to chant Om. How many chant Tattvamasi or know what it means or even heard of it? There are some, but Om is the main sound. From Om is explained in Gayatri. From Om comes Gayatri. From Gayatri comes the Veda. And the last part of all the Veda is the Srimad Bhagavatam, which explains the Gayatri and so forth. So he's gone through these points, and the sannyasis were very pleased with it. And but now they've asked, okay, you told us what's wrong with Shankar's explanation. We accept it, actually. A lot of his points were really hard to digest, but he's the Acharya, so we just went along with it. But we're kind of like confusing. The Sutrism position, there's only Brahman, but there's Maya, but there's not Maya. The appearance of Maya, but how does the two come out of one, and so forth. So their heads were spinning, but they were going along with it. It was a little bit of the group think there that they were affected by, and Mahaprabhu was thinking outside of the box of Shankar's prison there, and they're impressed. They're feeling free to think, and they like what Mahaprabhu said, so they want to know from him now. How do you explain all the sutras? You said you didn't know, but we see that you do know very well. So how do you explain? So he wants to now give a brief explanation. So Mahaprabhu begins. Brihad Vastu Brahmakahi Sri Bhagavan. The great substance, Brihad Vastu, Brahma, means Brahman. That great substance, Brahman, Kahi, we call Sri Bhagavan. Sad Pidaishwarya Purna Paratapadam. He is replete with all six opulences. This is, of course, Parashara's famous definition of Bhagavan. Aishvaryasya samagrasya viryasya yashashastriya jnana vairagya yoschaya, so forth. So wealth, strength, beauty, knowledge. Wealth, strength, beauty, knowledge, fame, and renunciation. These are the six opulences. Who possesses them in full? This is Bhagavan. So he says, we call him Bhagavan. He's replete with six opulences. Paratatvadam. He is the abode of the supreme truth. He exists. He is the abode. He's also saying here, he has an abode. It's one with him. What is it? Tadam Vrindavanam. Is that first? Tadam Vrindavanam. She Chakravarti. Anyway, means Krishna is a gold or one in this. Tadam Vrindavanam. And he says, Sarup Aishwarya Tanra Nahi Maya Gandha. His Swarup is full of opulence and Tanra Nahi Maya Gandha. In him there is not a scent of Maya. In his form, in his Swarup, it's full of spiritual opulences. There's not a scent of Maya. He's obviously replying to the idea of Shankar, of these two tiers of Brahman. You know what I mean by that? That there is Brahman, Nirguna, and then there's the Saguna Brahman, which means the Ishwar, who is Brahman, taking the form of the mode of goodness, appearing to create the world that doesn't exist, and he doesn't ultimately exist either. And there's the practical reality and the ultimate reality, and so Vyavaharik and Paramarthic reality, and ultimately this Ishwar, Bhagavan doesn't exist. So this is a very different explanation that you can't find it in the scripture. It's just not there. Sakala Vedera Hai Bhagavan Se Sambandha. And this is taught throughout the Vedas, and we call it Sambandha. So he's saying that we also have knowledge. Our knowledge is not oneness between Atma and Brahman. We call it Sambandha. Because we don't deny the world, Bhagavan, or the Jiva. So the Sambandha is basically, what is the relationship between the world, the Jiva, the world and Bhagavan, Jiva and Bhagavan. This is the basic Sambandha. Sambandha means relationship. So there are different manifestations of the Shakti, Bhagavan. There's the Maya Shakti, there's Bhagavan, there's the Jiva Shakti, for example. What's the relationship between them? Instead of doing away with them altogether, because we call it Sambandha, knowledge of relationship. So when we sometimes posit or champion bhakti over gyan, this is not a advocacy of ignorance, not knowing the scriptures, the bhakti shastras. You can hear that sometimes. Someone knows the scripture better than you, and you have a discussion, and they say, well, it's not about gyan. Anyway, that's their way of defeating you when they can't. It's not about gyan. So you study some books. Yeah, these books, the Caitanya Charitamrita, that kind of book. That's why we encounter this kind of thing. No, this is very important. Sambandha gyan. Sometimes now, someone was telling me that some devotees just want to emphasize the chanting. No questions asked. Just chant. They get together, long kirtan, no questions asked. No questions allowed, just chant. After all, chanting answers all the questions, right? No philosophy, no that. There's just going to be arguments and differences and so on and so forth. So we just chant. But Bhaktivinoda Thakur was in an environment a century more past where many people chanted, and they were born as Vaishnavas, and they got Diksha and so forth, but they didn't get Sambandha Gyan. because their so-called gurus really didn't have it. And they chanted and there wasn't any result. This is where you get this. This is another, we talk about where you get the as it is and where mental speculation comes from. See how it's abused to become a fanatic. But there's another thing now, where this idea that siksha is more important than diksha. You heard this? Where does this come from? It comes from Bhakti Vinod. In the time in which he was living, was amongst us, I should say, and there were many Vaishnavas, nominal Vaishnavas, in name only, born as Vaishnavas in Bengal, follower Caitanya, so forth, and they were initiated, and but they didn't have any sambandha gyan. They didn't have any siksha. They didn't really know the Gaudiya philosophy. And they chanted, went to temples, and did the rituals, and so on and so forth, but they weren't getting the prema. And then, to make matters worse, well, there were some imitations of the prema and the parakya in this world amongst the sadhus and so forth, so-called sadhus, babas, and so it was a problem. So he made this strong emphasis, there need to be sambandha gyan. What did he do? He wrote 100 books. See, this was his emphasis, is 400 whatever plus years from the time of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and all these books were written. He made much effort. Prabhupada used to say, and we've got at least 60 books, and you think we're just worshiping of stone? Why we're writing all these books are supporting that worship of the stone. They should be studied, so on and so forth. When I was first introduced to Prabhupada as having been successful in selling his books by Ramaswara writing the Prabhupada letter, and this boy Tripurari, he sold this many books, and so Prabhupada was very nice to Tripurari, he's selling so many books, and then he wrote his own handwriting. Make sure that he's always reading them also. So I, of course, took that to heart. And this is something, again, the nature of Bhagavan, nature of the world in relation to Bhagavan, Jiva Tattva, Vaishnav Tattva, Radha Tattva, Nam Tattva, Shakti Tattva, all these truths as understood by as explained by the Goswamis, drawing as they do from the main text, Nana Shastra Vicharana Nipuno Saddharma Samstapavo Lokanam Hitakarano, to give the name on your Shanan of great Lokanam Hitakarano. Out of compassion, they did this, they wrote like this. They do all this, and this is to be taken advantage of. Not that everybody will be a scholar and philosopher, and so, at least let's not object to it when it's presented. By way of saying, anyway, you're just bhakti is more important than gyan, so who cares for your arguments? Well, the arguments are good. The controversial issues can be settled, at least in terms of Gaudiya Siddhanta. So we have some knowledge, it's called sambandha gyan. When we advocate and underscore or champion bhakti over gyan, that should not be misunderstood. It's very important. Bhakti Vinod said, without the sambandha gyan, the chanting will go on, and there will be very little progress. Indeed. So again, this is where his emphasis of siksha comes over diksha. Oh, you got initiated here, but you didn't get any sambandha. You need siksha guru. And it can be argued, has been argued, that Bhakti Vinod himself derived more from his Siksha Guru than his Diksha Guru, because there are things that we find in him that were not in his Diksha Guru, but were in his Siksha Guru, Das Babaji. And the two disagreed over his discovery of the birthplace of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. The Diksha Guru rejected him on the basis of that, but Jagannath Das Babaji confirmed it. So the history is. So he himself is kind of an example of what he's talking about. That doesn't mean that Diksha is not important. Siksha is important, and use an example currently. And Prabhupada is my Siksha Guru, so I don't need a Diksha Guru, or I can have one if I have to have one, because it's the rule, so we get one. This is going in the other direction now. This is like, no speculation means I should become a literalist fanatic. It's another example of abuse. This is where the idea comes from, the climate, the times. If you study Bhaktivinoda Thakur, what he says is a Kanishthadikari Vaishnava, it won't be anybody that got converted to Vaishnavism by philosophy and so forth. It's a different, kind of species. You can find them now in the West too, I suppose, that don't have any Sambandha Gyan. They like to chant, whatever. So we also consider that many who got initiated and got Sambandha Gyan are also Kanishtas. We take it to a higher level. But the dynamic idea of the Madhyam is one who wants to make advancement, who's trying to make progress and learn the teaching and strengthen their faith by Shastra. After all, it's Shastriya Shraddha. Faith in the argument coming from the scripture that been given to us by our Shastra Gurus, the 6 Swamis, the founding acharyas of the Sampradaya. They wrote the books, the seminal books. All books are derived from them, and the points raised in them need to be supported by them, and so forth. So he starts out like this. He says, we have our own Gyan, and it's called Sambandha Gyan. Acknowledges the world, it acknowledges the reality of it, the reality of the jiva. And as far as Brahman goes, it describes him as Sadaishwarya, as ultimately as Bhagawan. Of course, we have the 3 terms by which the Absolute is known, according to the Bhagavatam: Brahmeti, Paramatmeti, Bhagavaniti, Shabdate. In a more general sense, he's saying that Krishna is Brahman. Brahman, in a full sense, he'll explain, is Bhagawan. He says, Tamre Nirvishesh Kahi Chit Shakti Namani. So, about this Nirvishesh, we say Chit Shakti Namani. Arda Swarup Namanile Punata Hoyahani. That because the Nirvishesh is without any differentiation. What's another word for that?
Any qualities? Features? Content.
And it was Nirvishesh. There's differentiated absolute and the non-differentiated absolute. So about the non-differentiated absolute, about Brahman, Nirvishesh Brahma, then you're not getting the full picture of Brahman. Brahman, as that described, is he says is Bhagawan. He's full of Shaktis, differentiation, and you can say something about him. Now you've got something to talk about. About Nirvishesh Brahman, there's nothing to be said. You can't describe it. Bhagawan, by contrast, has character, lila, and of course all of this variety that his Swarup Shakti is manifesting makes for the possibility of loving. In Brahman, there's no capacity for loving. So he says, logically speaking, if you only know half the truth about the Nirvishesh aspect of Brahman, then you're at a loss. You can't understand the whole truth. So we acknowledge the Nirvishesh aspect of Brahman. It's just an aspect, as Krishna says in the Gita, what? Brahmanohi pratishtaham. And Brahman is subordinate to me. Sutre manigana iva. Everything is resting on me like pearls on a thread. Many places he states it. So Brahman is subordinate to me. What is it? Reading Brahma Samhita some time back. Point is made nicely there also. So he makes the point here. Your idea of Brahman is like half idea only. And you deny the full side, called Sadguna Brahman. This is all implied here, of course. This is if you know Shankara's teaching. And he goes on, Bhagavan Prapti Hetu Jekari Upai Shabanani Bhakti Krishna Prapti Rasahai. So, having spoken in a very condensed way about Sambandha, now he's going to talk about what?
Abhideya.
Exactly, Abhideya. The action that follows the conceptual orientation in which there's Jiva, Maya, there's Bhagavan, and means for the Jiva to be delivered. It's all right there, of course, in Bhagavatam, we'll get to that. But so he says what? Bhagavan Prapti Hetu Kari Upai. It means Prapti Hetu, the cause, it means by Hetu, cause, the reason, the means, Prapti, for attaining Bhagavan, Kari Upai, or by which he can be approached, Shravanadi, Bhakti, Krishna Prapti Rasahai. It is called Shravanadi Bhakti. Shravan means hearing, and Adi means etc. Shravan, Kirtan, Smarnam, this Bhakti is the means. Krishna Prapti Rasahai. This is the only way for attaining this Bhagwan, this Purna Brahma, Param Brahma. Shankara has his own idea about bhakti, of course. It's for people who are less, not very well fortified by intelligence and able to do introspection and so forth. And they need some emotional outlet, so they can do some bhakti, and then they can come in a little bit of a slower course, roundabout course, to undifferentiated spiritual truth, knowledge, which is Brahma. So Mahaprabhu was differing here. He says, this is the way, and is the only way. Shravanam Kirtan Sarva, say Sarva Vedya Abhideyanam. So through all the Vedas, this is called by the name Abhideya, the way, the means. Sadhana Bhakti Hoite Hoi Premera Udgam. And the way is such that the way is also the end, in that the way is sadhana bhakti, and by sadhana bhakti, premera udgam, prem manifests, prem bhakti manifests in due course. Bhakti begets bhakti. Krishnera charane hoi yari anurag, Krishna binu anyatra taranahi rahirag. So now it goes on to the third thing. What's that? Rayoja. Krishnera charane hoi yari anurag. If one develops anurag and becomes attached to Krishna's lotus feet, Krishna binu anyatra taranahi rahe rag. The symptom of this, if one develops anurag for Krishna, deep spiritual attachment for the lotus feet of Krishna, then he's more or less saying the symptom, Krishna binu anyatra taranahi rahe rag. He has no attachment for anything else. They're saying we devotees also have detachment. This is our way of detach by being attached to Krishna. We have no attachment to anything else, and there's no question of falling back into it because we've attached ourselves to something superior. Panchama Purushartha se prem mahadhan, having kind of defined it, now he explains, gives the name Krishna Madhurasa Karja Ashpadan. He says, this is the Panchama Purushartha, the fifth goal of life. There's the four, Dharma, Artha, Kama, and Moksha. So this is the fifth. Say Prem, Mahadhan. It is the great Mahadhan, great wealth. One is Prem. Prem Purushartha. Prem Prayojan. Is the idea. This again is a very characteristic of our lineage. All the Vaishnava lineages and the Shankara monistic lineage also describe the goal of life as mukti. We describe it as prema. And prema in particular, even though there is a prema of Vaikuntha, we consider that a kind of mukti. We consider the prema of Golok to be something that doesn't even look like mukti. It looks like you didn't go anywhere, something like that. But of course you have, but it's just to underscore the point that mukti is insignificant, inconsequential in comparison. Bhakti belittles mukti as prema bhakti belittles mukti. Even bhava bhakti, I should say, belittles mukti, makes it out to be a small, insignificant thing. This is the big thing for all other lineages. So it's there, but by use of the word prema and focusing on the ideal of Golok, as you know, when Krishna was asked by his associates in the Braj, what will our next life be? He showed them. If you're going to go from the Adi-lila to the Adi-lila, pretty much everything's the same. Your cows are there, your friends are there, so on and so forth. So as much as we build a community here, for example, and persons take this to heart and so forth, then you can take your friends with you. And then you can say, well, they're on the Madhava in Golok. If they're not, I'm not interested in you. I can stay here. You can say that with feeling, with meaning. So it's a way, the use of the word prema is a way of making little of mukti as we do, and it plays out, as I'm saying, in the form, the actual form. It's aprakrita, not adhoksaja. Vaikuntha is adhoksaja. It's very different. There's four-armed people there. It's overtly different when you enter into Goloka. It's different than major metropolitan city in the West here, but it's very human-like, right? And all the human forms, expressions of love are there. Not in Vaikuntha. There's only the reverential love and other types of love. You don't find them. Neutral love and servile love. That's not like this world. Those are all given second place. Those are given second place to the love we have for our friends, families, all that for Krishna. So it doesn't even look like liberated life. And what did Mahaprabhu say? Mama janmani janmanishwari bhavatad bhakti rahorita kituri. I'm not concerned about mukti, being free from birth and death. I just have attachment now for bhakti, and wherever I am, it doesn't matter. So prema purushartha, panchama purushartha, say prema mahadan. The greatest riches is prema. It's the fifth goal. Krishnera madhurasa karayaspadan. By it, you will get a taste for madhurasa. He says, this is an optimum. By it, you can taste. It's another way of explaining. By it, you can taste madhurya rasa. You can't taste madhurya rasa in Vaikuntha. You can't taste it in Ayodhya. It's not possible. Only in Goloka. And the full face of that only in Gokul, within Goloka. So prema hoite Krishna hoi nija bhakta vas. Prema hoite pai Krishna seva sukha rasa. He explains it further. From that prema for Krishna, the nija bhakta vas, the devotee takes a position such that Krishna, Bhagavan, who is the full Brahman, as he's explained already, which made him very big, becomes very small. This bigness has been emphasized, the difference between Bhagavan, Sadashvarya Purna, and the Jiva. And now he's coming around full to the other direction. And this big person becomes small and overwhelmed by the devotee, the Jiva, who is endowed with bhakti. And he becomes submissive to the devotee. This is a fascinating thing. Imagine these Maya bodies are hearing this for the first time. It's fascinating. They all got all, whoa, we only knew half the truth. Nirvishesh Brahma didn't quite understand that. And there's Bhagavan, and he's got all this Aishvarya, and we're only tiny jivas, and also, and the power of bhakti is such. When it reaches the pitch of prema, he who is full of all opulences, the Parabrahma, becomes submissive to the devotee. You want to become one with Brahman. What a small idea that is. Brahman here becomes subordinate to you. Your idea was to become God, so to speak, in a very kind of abstract sense. Here, the idea is that God becomes subordinate to you. That's what it means, Madhurasa. That's what it means, Vatsalya Rasa. Sakyas becomes a plaything in the hands of his devotees. Prema hoite pai Krishnera Siva Sukharasa. And so the devotee derives happiness in a particular rasa in relationship with Krishna. Sambandhavideya prayojannam etinartha sarvasutre paryaspana paryavasana. One's relationship with the personality of God at Prabhupada translates it, his activities in that relationship, the sambandha, avideya, and the ultimate goal of life, the prayojan, brain prayojan. These three subjects are explained in all the sutras, for they form the purpose of the culmination of the entire Vedanta philosophy. So the fact of the matter is that Vedanta Sutra is divided into these sections. The first two adhyayas are chapters. There's 4 adhyayas, 4 chapters, and they have 4 divisions within them. So the first 2 are more or less the sambandha. And in the context of that, they take on, in the second adhyaya, different opposing philosophies of the time, the Vaisheshika, the Nyaya, and so forth. And then the third chapter is Abhideya, and the fourth is the attainment. This is how that text is divided, and this is how the Bhagavatam is divided also. And right down to the 4 seed verses of the Bhagavatam, they're divided. 4 seed verses are divided into Sambandha, Abhideya, and Prayojan. So Mahaprabhu says this is everywhere in the scripture. These divisions are there. You can't have this division in Mayavad philosophy. So, e mata sarva sutre vyakyan shumiya sakala sannyasi koi vinaya koi. So, in the Mayavadis heard this explanation of Sambandha, Abhideya, Prayojan. He spoke very humbly. Dear sir, Vedamaya Mutti Tumi, Sakshat Narayana. You are directly Narayan. You are the very personification of Vedamaya. Vedamaya Mutti Tumi. You are the very form of the Veda yourself. You're directly Narayan. Shama aparat puve tikolaniyam. Previously, we offended you, and we ask for your forgiveness. Se hoite sannyasita pire yelaman Krishna nam sadai kore graham. From that moment on, when the Mayavadis heard the explanation of Vedanta Sutra from Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, their minds changed. And on the instruction of Mahaprabhu, they too continually chanted Krishna, Krishna. So this is explanation. There's a few concluding verses of Mahaprabhu's activities in the town of, and reuniting with Sanatan and Tapan Mishra and Chandrasekhar. But I wanted to read to you the 4 verses of the Bhagavatam, the seed, so that you can see how in the seed verses of the Bhagavatam, this Sambandha, Avideya, and Prayojan is found. Bhaktivinoda Thakur, as you know, most of you probably know, he wrote a book called Bhagavad Arka Mala. It's 1,000 rays of the Bhagavatam. He took 1,000 verses of the Bhagavatam and categorized them as Sambandha. These are about Sambandha, Avideya, and Prayojan. Sridhar Maharaj had a mind to do a book, I think, of 300 verses, he said, in a more condensed form, but he never got to it. He learned and how do you say, recently passed away?
You just said it. You
Yeah.
recently passed away.
Haridas Shastri wrote a book in which he had took every verse of the Bhagavatam and showed, and the corresponding verse or verses of the Vedanta Sutra. It's just a list. I got it, I don't know, maybe 20 years ago. And it was in Hindi. I had a Hindi disciple translate it all. Every verse of Bhagavatam, the corresponding verse of Vedanta Sutra, which served very scholarly work. Sure, no comment or anything, or just numbers, but it served to demonstrate, obviously, a very central point of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's Vedanta. When Mahaprabhu speaks again on this Lila narrative again appears at the end of the Adi-lila, Mahaprabhu speaks a little bit more about Sambandha, Avideya, Prayojan, and the Bhagavatam, the important place of the Bhagavatam. You want my commentary on Vedanta? I don't need a commentary on Vedanta. The Bhagavatam is already there. It's divided in this way, like the sutras are, and so forth and so on. And he will cite the 4 verses there, the seed verses of the Bhagavatam, and show how they're divided as well. But anyway, it's a useful, for the scholars, and devotees, useful exercise, considerable scholarship to go through that and match them all up. What it demonstrates, the point is that Vedanta Bhagavatam is the natural commentary on Vedanta Sutra, a central point to our Vedanta. So I've anyway paraphrased these verses. The verses of the Bhagavatam, there are actually 4, the Chaturshloka, and they're prefaced by the 2 which introduce them. So often they're included. And they follow the 4 questions of Brahma. Brahma was in trance, sitting, meditating, and he heard one of those unauthored sounds that we have talked about in recent days. Tapa, tapa. These 2 letters from the Sanskrit alphabet, which means sacrifice. And so this is the way forward. This is the way of knowing. He wanted to know his source. So tapa, for a smart guy, you don't have to say much. Tapa went into his 8 ears. 8 ears? Yeah. It's 8 ears. And he turned around there and went down into his heart, and he changed, and he performed the sacrifice. He really did a meditative form of bhakti, and he got the result. Krishna appeared before him. And so he asked Krishna 4 questions. What is the nature of your form? He's looking at it. What is the nature of your form? And 2, what is the nature of the world and your form in the world in relation to your Shaktis? And 3, so those are 2 questions that require answers of the Sambandha nature. Your form, nature of your form, and the nature of the world and the interaction of your Shaktis. And 3, what is the nature of your lila and the prema that drives it? So that is that question about the prayojan tattva. And the 4th question is, what is the means to attain that? Question about abhideya. So he asks about questions that require sambandha, gyan, abhideya gyan, and prayojan gyan. So I just read these, and this is a paraphrasing of the meaning of these verses. It's a translation, I should say, that includes the purport based on, I studied this commentary of Madhva, Jiva Goswami, Sanatana Goswami, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, and Srinivas Acharya, all had commentaries on Chaturshloki of Bhagavatam some time ago. And so it's based on this and some, yeah. So first, the 2 introductory verses. He says, Krishna says to Brahma, you heard the questions of Brahma. Please take this confidential knowledge of my opulence, gyan, that's the Sanskrit words I'll say are in parentheses, they're words from the verses. Please take this confidential knowledge of my opulence, gyan, and the special and more confidential knowledge of my sweetness, vigyan, in relation to my original form, Swami Bhagavan, and my Shaktis. Knowledge of my form is Jnanam, and knowledge of the distinction between myself and my Shaktis is Vigyan. Special knowledge, or Vishesh Gyan. I give this to you in theory, Gyan, although it is the secret of sacred sound, Shastra, and the secret of non-dharma. It is now yours to realize, Vigyan, with my blessings, with my blessing. It culminates in the mystery of the highest love for me, Prem, Rahasyam, which is attended by various bhavas, Tad Angam, and is attained by Raganuga Sadhana Bhakti, supported by Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti in the form of hearing, chanting, and meditating on me, Tad Angam. Now, you should endeavor to tread this path of praying, paying close attention. This is the first verse. So it's a preface to the 4 verses. There's 2 of them. And you can see here, he uses the words Gyan and Vigyan in different ways to speak about Aishvarya Gyan and Madhurya Gyan, knowledge of Krishna, for example, as Narayan, knowledge of Krishna as Krishna. Gyan and Vigyan is knowledge and realization. Gyan, Vishesh Gyan, knowledge of your Shaktis, special kind of knowledge about your differentiated energies, and so forth. So this is all saying, I'm going to speak to you about Sambandha Gyan. And also, I'm going to speak to you about Rahasyam, the secret of praying, which is the attainment, and by Tadangam, or which is constituted of various bhavas and so forth, and which is attained by Raganuga Bhakti, supported by Sadhana Bhakti, which is also called Tadangam. So he's said, I'm going to speak to you about Sambandha, Abhideya, and Prayojan, in answering your questions. And verse 2, a little shorter, I bless you that you may realize in praying all that I am, appearing as the cowherd son of Nanda, my form, qualities, nature, activities, and existence. Let these be awakened within you on my mercy. Verse 3, now this is the beginning of the Chatur Shlok itself. Knowledge of my form is this. I existed along with my eternal retinue within Vaikuntha, in my form as Narayan, and in my confidential abode, Goloka, in the form of a cowherd, before the world of material experience was manifest from me. I am its cause, and I'm also the effect of the world itself, in that the world is constituted of my energies and nothing more. It is I who also oversee the world and enter into it in the form of countless avatars. And when by my arrangement the world again becomes unmanifest, I continue to exist along with my associates and abode. This is a verse of Sambandha Gyan, as is this next verse, verse 4, verse 2 of the Chatusloki itself. You ask about my Shaktis. My Shaktis are dependent upon me. They do not exist independent of me. Under the influence of my Maya Shakti, the Jiva Shakti perceives value in that which appears unrelated to me, and which is unrelated to the Jiva itself, and when in fact there is no value therein. Such perception is only a reflection of that which has real value. It is only darkness, not the light of my Swarup Shakti, that gives praying to the Jiva Shakti. Then he goes now to the Prayojan. This is the way Brahma asked the questions. Third verse of the Chatusloki. The nature of praying is very confidential. It is something like the gross elements that, while all pervasive, are at the same time localized within the bodies of the jivas. So you have earth, water, fire, air, ether, makes up the world, and also in a microcosmic sense, they make up the bodies of the jivas. So praying is something like that, he said. Similarly, to explain it, although I myself am all pervasive, I appear within the hearts of my praying bhaktas. Indeed, in praying, I appear within their hearts and also outside of their hearts, standing before them, in front of them. My mother saw me to be all pervasive. Hooked in his mouth, or Adi-lila, relative to this month, but with the rope of her love, she tied me up, and I could not escape. I am the supreme controller, but I am controlled by my devotees praying. My lila is behind everything, yet it appears on earth. I am one with everything and different from it at the same time, and this inconceivable metaphysical reality is the canvas on which the art of my pastimes of praying is drawn. So he gives a nice example, as the elements are there, but they're localized. So I'm everywhere, but I have a localized form that appears in relation to bhakti, as the fruit of bhakti, appearing before my devotees. And although I'm everywhere, they're seeing me in a condensed form of Satchidananda right in front, not only in their heart, but right in front of them. And finally, the way, the last of the verses. The means to attain me, to attain praying, is thus. First of all, one must be interested in understanding the highest truth. Such interest will be best served at the feet of the Guru. Therein, one will learn systematically what karma is, what jnana is, what yoga is, what bhakti is, and how praying bhakti is the highest truth. The Guru will teach all these things and thus directly and indirectly explain the glory of praying bhakti, drawing from the sacred text and thereby making the student one-minded. One must then follow me in the form of the Guru by enthusiastically rendering service. Enthusiastically means at all times and in all circumstances, those favorable and those unfavorable, making this effort one's life and soul. So this is the Chatusloki of the Bhagavatam. You can see it's divided in this way. This is the essence of the, and so throughout all the text we have these visions. Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu ki jai, Tatra Srimad Bhagavatam. Question?
Yes, I was just wondering, because you were talking about this Sambandha Gyan and how the chanting, and if you don't have Sambandha Gyan, then you don't attain praying. So in the Bhakti Yoga clubs, we've come in contact with a couple of other ones, and they say that, you know, they're getting so much success with just chanting and hardly any philosophy. They don't even want to bring up any topic about God or And I feel like that isn't right. And they don't wear devotional clothes either. They just go as non-devotees, and they're getting lots of people to come and chant and take the shot and but I don't know, maybe it's just the area we're in, but I don't find that to be so in our area. But I was just wondering what your thoughts are on it.
Well, it seems unavoidable that you may attract people by chanting, but it seems unavoidable that you have to give them some bandhagyan because who knows what they're thinking when they're chanting, what their conception is, and so forth. And the conception behind the chanting, there are Mayavadis that chant Hare Krishna in Vrindavan with the view to merge into Brahman, with the view that Krishna is Saguna Brahman, as Shankar thinks of it. So Pujapad Sridhar Maharaj used to say that kind of chanting is like Krishna feels like throwing lightning bolts at him. So, and people come with all kinds of ideas. Even if you give them some bandhagyan, they interpret it. When you ask questions, realize, they didn't get that point. Then you have to explain it again and so forth. So even if you give some bandhagyan, you can see that. If you do, you ask a question, you can see they don't. Their conception behind the chanting, Nama Shreshtam Api Sachi Bhutram. Raghunath said, I got the highest conception of the name from Mahaprabhu. So I could see where it would be attractive to people maybe to chant. You could put forward the kirtan, and they have these bhakti fests where they do that kind of thing. People wear T-shirts and be in the bhav, and I, don't not attracted to going there. It seems like a fairly sensuous environment at a glance. I haven't been there, so I don't want to. I'm just saying this is my impression. I realize it has spiritual trappings and so forth. So I don't know how you can avoid giving them some bandhagyan. And if they like the chanting, then don't they have to? At some point, are you going to explain to them what it's about? If you're going to say, well, look, we don't want to have any deities because people think they're statues, and so we just give them to chant, and we be careful not to wear devotional clothes because they won't come otherwise. And I couldn't imagine that people wouldn't come because somebody had devotional clothes on when you're chanting. In different language. Sanskrit chants. If you want to follow that out, why not chant? Why call him Krishna? Oh, Supreme Person. Something. That would be really dangerous. So I don't quite follow all that, but that's a whole other thing. People can make any kind of presentation. Clothes aren't the most important thing to wear and whatnot, but the knowledge to somebody again, it's very important. And there's the example I gave of the time of Bhakti Vinod it's reality. People were chanting, but they weren't getting it. Therefore, they were owls and bowls and Prakriti Sahajiyas, and they were all attached to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So, is that what we want? How can we say we just do the Abhideya and we won't bother with the Sambandhagyan and think we'll get the Prayojan praying? There's three here. There's three, and so you need them all. You may be philosophy light in a certain situation because people are coming for kirtan, not philosophy. But I don't know if you can speak well in philosophy. I think people will like it. It's pretty nice. And it may be that persons who have that strategy don't have the ability to speak in such a way that's very compelling and charming, and it's become dogmatic for them, and so forth. And so, but they go on with it anyway. But if you're alive and can speak about it, I could see it be more attractive than the chanting. I mean, I can sit. I'm not anybody. Well, I'll use myself as an example, but I'm not great or anything. But I could sit and I've had people, 100 people from contemporary society, Eastern-oriented, young people, I guess, like you're talking about, sit for 2 hours and listen to a lecture. I don't know if they could chant for 2 hours. We chant too, but I mean, so I think it's not what it may be. What you're talking about, it's not what it made out to be. I mean, like it's a great success. People are chanting, and then the chanting will do everything, and then you find out, a couple of years later, what they're thinking and they're chanting, and
Or if they,
what I mean, the somebody, yeah, what about, you're not going to tell them about the non-operads? You're not going to tell them. They're just going to chant, and if you have life, then you should be able to explain. The Prabhupada didn't just come and do the chanting. People are not interested in philosophy. I don't think that's true. People are not interested in philosophy for the most part anyway. They never are, but if they're going to come to a spiritual gathering, you would think they'd be a little interested to hear. So, I mean, but I can see that, maybe want to be philosophy light, have a kirtan, prasadam. But obviously, if someone becomes a little interested, it keeps coming back. You start giving them the Sambandha, right?
Yeah, I think they do light philosophy and then mostly kirtan. They're just trying to give them a really good time and get more people. And I thought, well, it's not about numbers because you always say that.
Mm-hmm.
But it just seems like, I don't know, it just seems like just do what you're supposed to do. And then if somebody doesn't like it, they just won't come around.
Yeah, I mean, you have to be artful and present it in a thoughtful way, and you want to kind of bring it to them on their level and then package it in such a way and so forth. But certainly not at the cost of the Sambandha. You're not giving them the whole package then. So, but we judge by the result. But ultimately, inevitably, it's definitely a fact that we have to get some Sambandha. Get properly oriented. What is bhakti? All kinds of crazy ideas out there about what bhakti is. So you want to go through all that's the business of the teacher to do that. Anything else?
We were just reading recently the 22nd chapter of the Adi-lila, and about the path of devotional service. And Srila Prabhupada was making the purport that the neophyte devotee is more interested in Krishna consciousness or love of Krishna, but he's not interested in the basis of devotion, nor in the path, understanding the path of devotional service. And that he needs to understand the path of devotional service and the basis of devotion to make progress.
There you go.
There's just like what you're saying.
Confirming, right. I mean, what Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu is there. What is bhakti? It's a popular word. I mean, it's bhakti is becoming popular. Kirtan's becoming popular. You've got to be able to. There's a lot of preaching to be done because the actual ideas are not so popular. Everybody wants freedom. We're teaching slavery. Guess what? You're supposed to be a slave. That's what I want. That's the idea. I don't know. Yeah.
We had this couple last week that were there, and we talked. My husband was talking a lot about speaking on the Gita, and we thought they were getting really bored because the girl was like, fidgeting around. And I thought after they left, they're never going to come back again. And then he wrote me an email. We really want to come back again. Are you going to be doing this again? So you never know.
Yeah. Nice. Your little apartment there, getting programs. That's nice.
Well, I envision that you're going to be coming up there and converting all the Mayavadis. They actually asked my husband, he was telling them he was going to be going, that poor man was going to be going seeing a guru, and they were like, there's a guru in North Carolina? We'd like to see him. So maybe.
Sure, yeah.
soon.
I like talking to those neo-Advaitins.
You do it like Lord Caitanya, very
Hare
gently and.
Shri Mahaprabhu ki jai. Gaura Mara. Gaur Bhakta Vrinda.
I didn't want to say this while the taping was going on, but in the beginning you were saying how there's this conception of chanting and how that's somebody's really focused on chanting. It's all about chanting. It's only about chanting. The word on the street is that Bindra's, have you seen Bindra's book? He has written that actually the idea that Prabhupada wanted book distribution was